Federal agents raid a California cannabis farm, sparking protests and a child labor investigation. President Trump visits flood-ravaged Texas to meet with survivors, and scientists rank the friendliest and most dangerous wild animals. Plus, a backpacker survives 12 days lost in Australia's Outback, and a surfer is rescued from a remote island after vanishing at sea. And here's your trivia question of the day. What's the average time American adults wake up to start their day? I'll have the answer for you at the end of the show. It's Saturday, July 12th, and this is the Flyover Podcast. Welcome to the Flyover Podcast, taking you above the noise for an unbiased, high-altitude view of today's headlines with daily coverage that's honest and refreshing. Let's cruise the news and land the facts. Hello and welcome. I'm Amy Hess, your weekend host and the host of our brand new spinoff podcast called The Feel Good Flyover. A new episode lands every Friday with the news that makes you feel uplifted and encouraged. I get to blend interviews, visuals, and audio together to bring those inspiring stories to life in a whole new way. If you missed yesterday's episode, be sure to check it out. I promise you won't regret spending a few minutes hearing about all the good that is still out there. All right, we've got a lot of stories to unpack for today, so let's get ready for takeoff. First up, federal agents found 10 illegal immigrant youths, most of them unaccompanied, at a California marijuana farm on Thursday, sparking an investigation into potential child labor violations. Border Patrol agents detained about 200 people during coordinated raids at Glass House Farm sites in Camarillo and Carpinteria. The operation turned tense with protesters blocking roads, throwing rocks, and shattering van windows. Agents used tear gas and less-than-lethal rounds before protesters finally dispersed overnight, after a federal convoy bypassed them on nearby dirt roads. 5 people were hospitalized, and the FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for information on a protester who allegedly fired a pistol at officers. Next, the president and first lady visited Texas Hill Country on Friday to see the devastation from the July 4th floods that killed at least 120 people, with dozens still missing. The Trumps met with Governor Greg Abbott, first responders, and survivors in Kerrville, pledging to help rebuild while acknowledging some losses can't ever truly be recovered. The first lady also promised to return and continue supporting families through the recovery. More than 12,000 volunteers are helping search for the over 160 people still missing across the state, many of them working 10-hour days. Finally, a new list ranking the nicest wild animals puts dolphins and sloths at the top for friendliness, with scientists saying dolphins can even sense our emotions and respond with compassion. Sloths, meanwhile, are basically the masters of staying calm and relaxed. Other friendly animals making the list include giant pandas, otters, red foxes, and manatees. On the danger list, wolves, grizzly bears, crocodiles, and maybe surprisingly, hippos and African Cape buffaloes. Experts warn that hippos are aggressive and fast, while Cape buffaloes can actually recognize and chase down humans they see as a threat. You can check out the full list linked in today's show notes. Let's take a look at what's making headlines in Washington. First up, the State Department began laying off more than 1,300 staffers on Friday as part of a major reorganization aimed at cutting the workforce by about 15%. In total, nearly 3,000 departures are expected, including earlier voluntary exits. Next, President Trump announced on Thursday that tariffs on Canadian imports will rise to 35% starting August 1st. The move comes in response to what he described as Ottawa's retaliatory duties and Canada's inadequate efforts to stop fentanyl at the border. In response, Canadian officials said Canada has made vital progress to stop the fentanyl epidemic in North America and are committed to working with the United States. And in some financial news, Bitcoin briefly topped $118,000 on Friday, setting a new all-time high. That's about $7,400 above last month and more than double its value from a year ago. And finally, a new internal poll from a Democratic super PAC is raising alarm bells for the party as it works to rebuild after last year's election losses. The poll conducted by Unite the Country shows Democratic approval has dropped below 35% among white men, Hispanic men, and working class voters. Many respondents describe the party as, quote, out of touch. Strategists say the party needs to focus more on economic issues and clear, common sense messaging to reconnect with these voters. There's also a push for new leadership and a stronger emphasis on meeting voters where they are before introducing broader policy ideas. The findings highlight big challenges ahead for Democrats as they prepare for future elections. We're sponsored today by Convoy of Hope, a remarkable organization on the ground right now in Texas, helping families devastated by historic floods. Torrential rains pushed the Guadalupe River up by about 26 feet in just 45 minutes, the worst flooding the U.S. has seen in decades. At least 120 lives have been lost, more than 160 people are still missing, and entire communities have just been wiped out. Convoy of Hope is delivering food, clean water, hygiene kits, and other essential supplies to help families who've lost everything. And today, the Flyover is matching the first $2,000 in donations, so your gift has double the impact. Since 1994, Convoy of Hope has served more than 300 million people worldwide facing disaster and crisis. They're also ranked among America's top 40 charities by Forbes, so you can give confidently, knowing your support is truly making a difference. Your immediate gift will bring hope and help to flood survivors, letting them know they're not alone as they work to rebuild their lives. To learn more and donate, visit the link in our show notes. And remember, every dollar you give today is matched by the Flyover up to $2,000. Please help if you're able. Together, we can deliver hope where it's needed most. All right, we've got some stories you'll only hear on the Flyover podcast, our exclusive podcast extra segment. Let's jump in. First up, the man charged with trying to assassinate former President Trump is making headlines again. Ryan Ruth, who was arrested last September near Trump's golf club in Florida, now wants to represent himself at trial this September. Ruth was arrested on September 15, 2024, after a Secret Service agent allegedly saw him holding a rifle through a fence at the Trump International Golf Club. At the time, Trump was playing on the green just one hole behind Ruth's position. Prosecutors say he's trying to turn the whole thing into, quote, a circus, but the judge hasn't ruled yet. Definitely a case to keep an eye on as we get closer to fall. Next, in Texas, amid all the devastating floods, there's a little bit of hope for some furry friends. Wings of Rescue airlifted 130 cats and dogs from a flooded shelter near Houston. The animals have been moved to northern states where they'll soon be up for adoption. A bright spot in a tough situation. And finally, a love story that truly went the distance. 13 years ago, a Canadian couple who were dating at the time tossed a wine bottle with a love note into the sea off Newfoundland. Fast forward to now, that same bottle just washed ashore nearly 2,000 miles away on Ireland's west coast. With a little help from social media, the finders tracked down the couple who are now married with 3 kids. Proof that love, and maybe a good bottle of wine, can really go the distance. Still ahead on the Flyover, reports confirm U.S. forces destroyed Iran's nuclear sites, a positive shift in talks between the U.S. and China, and a record-breaking pitch in baseball. But first, let's take a look at what's moving in the markets. All right, let's take a look at how the markets closed on Friday. The Nasdaq slipped slightly, down about 0.22%, while the S&P 500 dropped 0.33%. The Dow Jones saw a bigger dip, closing down 0.63%. On the flip side, the Bitcoin jumped up 1.35%, and gold was also on the rise, gaining 1.59% to finish around $3,370 per ounce. Now let's take a look at some of the top stories making headlines around the world. First, Israeli officials confirmed this week that U.S. forces destroyed Iran's nuclear sites at Fordow and Natanz. However, they believe near weapons-grade uranium may still be stored at the more fortified and deeper underground facility in Isfahan. These sites have long been at the center of international concern over Iran's nuclear program, and the situation remains closely watched. Next, Secretary of State Marco Rubio described talks with Chinese officials on Friday as positive and constructive. The discussions focused on building a baseline for continued dialogue and possibly setting up an official meeting between leaders. China's foreign ministry echoed that sentiment, saying both sides agreed that the meeting was positive, pragmatic, and constructive. And in a historical culture move, the Bayeux Tapestry, which depicts the 1066 Norman invasion and the Battle of Hastings, is set to return to Britain for the first time in nearly 1,000 years. The piece will be on display at the British Museum for a special exhibition running from 2026 to 2027. If you want to get a sneak peek at this incredible piece of history, we've got a link for you in today's show notes. Here's a look at what's happening in sports. World number 2, Carlos Alcaraz, beat American Taylor Fritz yesterday to advance to the finals at Wimbledon. The last time an American man made it to the title match was Andy Roddick back in 2009. In baseball, Oakland Athletics pitcher Mason Miller threw a blazing 104-mile-per-hour pitch on Thursday night, the fastest recorded in Major League Baseball so far this season. That's the kind of heat that'll even leave the radar gun sweating. If you want to see it for yourself, we've got a link for you in the show notes. And speaking of baseball, 3 of the top 4 jersey sellers this season are from the LA Dodgers, with Ohtani taking the number 1 spot. Still to come on the Flyover, some incredible rescue stories from around the world, and we'll check in on your poll results and finally reveal the answer to today's trivia question. Stay with us. Next, it's time for Etc. with some stories we knew you wouldn't want to miss. First up, a German tourist missing for 12 days was found alive on Friday in Australia's remote Outback. The 26-year-old backpacker was last seen June 29th in a tiny farming town northeast of Perth. Her abandoned van was found Thursday, and a day later, a member of the public discovered her wandering on a forest trail. She was in a fragile state but had no serious injuries and was flown to a hospital. Police called her survival remarkable, given the harsh conditions and cold nights in the reserve. Another rescue coming out of Australia, a 19-year-old surfer was found alive Thursday morning after vanishing while surfing off the country's east coast. After an emotional overnight search, he was discovered nearly 8 miles offshore on a remote island, a spot known for strong currents. His father described it as a 1 in a million miracle and said his son is now receiving medical treatment and recovering. And finally, a rescue story that's still unfolding here in the United States. A tractor-trailer cab plunged off the Delaware Memorial Bridge early Friday, sparking a massive underwater search for the missing driver. Authorities say the cab veered across several lanes before crashing through a barrier and falling into the river below. The Coast Guard and dive teams are still searching, and no other vehicles are believed to be involved. All right, next it's pole position, where we turn the mic over to you. Yesterday we asked if you'll be watching the Wimbledon finals. A big majority of you said nope at 65%. About 13% said you'll just catch the highlights, while 11% plan to watch it live. Another 6% said you'd only tune in if someone makes you. And 4% asked, what's Wimbledon? I have a big tennis fan in my house, so we'll definitely be watching. All right, here is the poll question for today, and you might sense a theme with our trivia question. All right, it is, what time do you start your day? Your choices are before 6 a.m., between 6 and 7:30 a.m., definitely before 9 a.m., hopefully before noon, and other. All right, you can go ahead and cast your votes in the links in the show notes. I think a lot of this depends on what stage of life you're in and what time you go to sleep. I'm excited to see your answers, and I'll share with you the results in tomorrow's episode. Okay, now it's time for a little brain boost with our trivia question of the day. What's the average time American adults wake up to start their day? The answer? 6:30 a.m. American adults wake up at 6:30 a.m. on weekdays on average, per Edison's Research Wake Me Up study. Most rise between 6 and 7:30 a.m. due to work and family demands. Now listen, don't feel pressured to change your answer to the poll question. I don't want you to feel like you have to say 6:30. Your answer can be anything. We want to know if our followers track with this study. All right, with that, we have landed today's Saturday edition of the Flyover podcast. Thanks for hanging with me today to get the no-spin news you need to know. If you like what we do, share our podcast with a friend and help us spread the word that now there's a smarter and drama-free way to get the news. And don't forget, we have several state editions that give you the local news you need to know. Head to jointheflyover.com to see if we have your state. I will see you again tomorrow. Take care.